Well, World Finals is about to happen tonight, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the LCS Players Association just a few hours before the season is officially done. Obviously, some big news has been coming out about that recently, and of course, this coverage is brought to you by Aliumer. But I'm joined right now by Darshan, who is the president of the North American LCS. Sorry, I'm going to say the full name: the North American League of Legends Championship Series Players Association. That's a
That's
long
right.
one. Yeah. Have you considered shortening the name?
Yeah, I mean, we are in the process of rebuilding, so no stone is going to be left unturned.
Yeah. Well, now there's no longer an EU LCS, so maybe in NALCS you can just be the LCS Players Association. You don't need to be the NALCS Players Association.
Oh, I think we actually did change. We are the LCSPA now,
Okay.
officially.
Riot's statement to me called you the whatever. I think you guys need to update the Twitter. Anyway, how are you doing? Because you're also dealing with free agency right now.
Yeah, I'm doing great. I may not even be playing on a team next split. I might just use the next split to just improve my gameplay instead of playing on a team. So I have no idea what's going to happen, but I feel happier and better than ever with my career and everything. So yeah, I've been doing great.
Very good. Well, I'm glad to hear that. I just assumed this might be a very hectic time for you because not only are you figuring out what your life looks like personally next year, you have to also figure out what the Players Association stuff looks like next year.
Yeah, I think a shift of perspective helped me a lot. I think in previous years, I'd be really stressed out about trying to find a team. And I'd always be like, what's the latest information? Let me check the roster leaks. Let me look at all that stuff. Now I just changed my mindset. I'm like, I'm just going to focus on improving and getting better. And everything else is going to figure itself out if I focus on that.
That's very good. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Well, regardless, let's talk a little bit about the Players Association. So, seems like there's been, and maybe some people haven't watched or seen the news, so I'm just going to recap it here. A lot of news recently. So, ESPN reported that you guys are no longer electing the current executive director back into that role again. Also, we've heard that Riot is planning on discontinuing funding, though they still have some funding on its way for the organization. And then also there are elections coming up next week that I saw you tweet about. So there's a lot going on with the Players Association right now. So maybe we can dive in just on that first point. I'd love to kind of hear, where you think, like, what your take is on the Players Association and the work that it has done over the last 3 years.
Now, that is a huge question. Let's see. So I think it started in 2017. The reason I got to become the president is because I was sitting there in the election and thinking about the future of players and thinking about all the things that could be improved. And I realized that what we really needed was someone passionate about genuinely helping players. And I truly believe, and I still to this day, I haven't made a penny off the Players Association, and I don't really plan to. My whole goal is to genuinely help improve players' quality of lives, allow them to be more competitive, and just be happier people, right? Provide resources and opportunities for players. That was the whole goal. Fast forward 3 years, I think that there are a lot of good things that we've done and a lot of positive change we've made for players. A lot of it hasn't been talked about as much as it could be, and I think that's part of the problem is that we're not a very public-facing company. We're not really, our business or entity, whatever you'd like to call us. We don't really tweet or make posts or anything about the things that we're doing or the players that we've helped and the efforts that we've made. And so I think talking about the last 3 years, it's kind of nobody's going to have the full picture of the story. And I think that's something I want to change going forward is I want us to be a more of a public entity. I want us to talk about the good things that we're doing and also the good things that we want to change and start more of that conversation moving forward on the right foot. Because, and I think this is a huge theme in NA, and I've noticed it in my own life too, right? You can talk about the problems and keep talking about the problems, but what I want to do, what the PA wants to do, what we want to do is focus on solutions. And so there's a story that kind of formulated in my head that I'd love to tell here, relating to myself and just NA in general. So I've been taking singing lessons for about, 6-7 years now, and I've had a bunch of different teachers. And my last teacher has been my most amazing one by far. And I kind of asked him, when you take a bad singer from like a really bad singer and make them great, what does that entail? How do you do that? And he likened a singer to a room. You open the door and it's an incredibly messy room. There's socks, laundry everywhere. The bed isn't made. The drawers are undone. There's stains on the floor. It's a messy room. And you're going to ask yourself, where do I start? How do I clean this room? And what my teacher said is, you pick something up. You pick something up and you start cleaning it up. And that's what happened with my singing. We started somewhere and we kept going. And years later, I had trouble streaming for more than 2 hours because my voice hurt. I had scrims on CLG where my voice hurt because I didn't understand how to use my voice and I couldn't talk. I had trouble singing high at all. And now I'm working on Freddie Mercury and Queen and Bruno Mars. And the theme of this is that's NA, right? We opened the door. It's a very messy room. And we're asking ourselves, how do we fix this? I've talked to coaches. I've talked to people in the scene. I've talked to players. I've been playing for 8 years. I know it's a very messy room. And we can talk about all the problems and we could say, hey, it can't be fixed. But I'm an optimist at heart. I believe in a lot of good things that can happen. And I genuinely believe that we should just open the door and pick up that first dirty sock and fling it in the hamper and start cleaning it up.
So are you satisfied then with like the work that the Players Association has done over the past 3 years? Because it sounds like you're saying there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and in some ways maybe you guys haven't even started yet. But I don't know if that makes you feel happy with and content with what the organization has achieved in the past 3 years, or if you feel like you have to kind of start now.
Oh, so I mean, there's a reason why we went through looking at the hiring process, removing our current executive director, and there is a lot more we can still do. There is so much more we could have done, right? I think the whole thing has been a learning lesson. There hasn't really been a players association before, and I think even myself, I learned and understood a lot more about what can we do in our role. And I think it goes back to really asking the question, what do the players really need? And I've talked to a lot of players. A lot of the times they have no idea what they need. So you need to have the foresight and understanding of looking at different players, right? Look at your Jensens, look at your Double Ifs and Bjergsens. Look at some of, like Apollo, someone who's been having a long career, even myself, maybe towards the end of their career, maybe they're still going, but they're kind of in the middle of the pack. And then some academy players and the players beginning, right? You have to put yourself in their shoes and ask, what does this player need that they don't even know that they want? And so that's kind of what spurred this whole thing is, I want to create the best possible players association that can do the most good for all these players. Yeah. Create these resources, create these opportunities. And we haven't done our due diligence. Like, let me get this clear. I think that we haven't showed everything that we have done in the last 3 years, but I imagine something much greater than what we have accomplished. And it's not something that's going to happen overnight. I'm not going to promise that we're going to change the world in the next couple of days or the next few months. It's going to be a process. But it starts with having a vision and a dream that it can be done. And so that's why I liken it to the dirty room. That's why I liken it to NA, is that what if this room was clean? What if I believe I'm going to get there and I'm just going to take one step at a time until pretty soon momentum is going forward and the room's looking a lot cleaner than it was before.
You mentioned that the departure of the current executive director or previous, I don't know the timeline, but do you intend to replace that executive director with another individual in that same role, or do you think you don't need one, or are you going to, just sort of disseminate out that stuff? How are you guys looking at that structure of the non-player part of the association?
Yeah, so I think, like I was saying, something I've been doing is reaching out to a lot of people to understand the problems better, not just players, but like I was saying, talking to coaches, talking to team managers, talking to different people in the scene, because a lot of players don't know what the issues are in the whole scene because they're not coaches. They're not interfacing with all the different aspects of the organization. For example, if I talk about academy, for example, say academy player comes in, a fresh player, they're just going to sign a 3-year contract and then they're like, oh shit, now I'm locked up for 3 years.
Yeah.
And so when I'm thinking about hiring someone new, we have to take the understanding that we have as players and realize, what are we missing? What understanding do we not have? What kind of roles do we need to fulfill? And so when I say we're leaving no stone unturned, we're looking at every aspect of the organization, our vision, our goals, the organizational structure, having that business acumen and understanding everything, bringing everything together and saying, this is our vision. These are our goals that we're going to accomplish, like making, like 1 year, 5 year, 10-year goals of like what we're actually trying to accomplish. Who is going to help us more with the budget that we have and the roles that we want to accomplish? Who should we hire? And so, I mean, I think I could use this video as a hiring thing too. If you're really passionate about making this kind of change, we are going to get a new executive director, someone in that same role. It might not be the same title, but we are going to be hiring people, and we're going to be hiring passionate people who can align with this vision and see all the good that can be done.
So the previous executive director came from a traditional sports world, and to my knowledge did not have any experience in esports. Do you envision making that same type of decision, that same type of hire again, or are you looking more towards esports people? Do you think that that's something that's more important, is to have people who have had experience in this industry?
I think that's what I'm trending towards more, is having someone who's had more experience. I think Hal really started growing more into the role, and he's definitely made a lot of value for the org. But I think it's taking a very honest look and saying, is this the best that we could do? Is this the best foot that we could put forward? And I think that's what spurred on this change, is we want to find the best possible fit based on our goals and our vision as an organization. And so, I think what you're saying is true in the fact that having someone who really deeply understands, lives and breathes esports, like I think that's someone who can really make the change happen that we would want at the PA.
Yeah. But you mentioned sort of the hiring and perhaps having multiple people there. We can sort of transition into this conversation now about Riot's funding of the organization, because as I believe you mentioned in the statement you provided me, it was never the plan to have Riot fund this thing entirety. I remember even talking to them way back in the day when it was first getting started, and for some reason I have 2 years in my mind, but maybe it was never defined on how long they would fund it. So is this something that you guys are seeking again, is to try to go back and see if you can get additional funding from them? Have you talked to the players to try to see if it can be self-funded by the players themselves? I mean, how are you approaching sort of making sure that there's enough money to hire somebody, essentially?
Great question. So Riot, like I said earlier, Riot's intention was never to fund this thing full time. There's so many conflicts of interest. If one of the organizations that we're trying to lobby to make change with and stand firm on this is what's important for the players, if we're getting paid by those people, how can we say with 100% certainty that we're unbiased, right? Like that there's so many things there, right? And that being said, Riot wanted to get us on our feet because they knew that the players didn't have the understanding yet to realize that this is important. And it was like I was saying, right? Like a lot of players don't know what they need or what they're going to need until you kind of show them, hey, this is why this is important, and hey, like this will actually help you. Whether it's like contractual things, whether it's mental health, legal fees, whatever it may be. And so, as for how we would go about making fees, as for like getting dues from players, that's something where I want to clearly demonstrate the value that the PA is offering before I would go and say, hey, like pay a couple $100,000, or not $100,000, couple $100 or $1,000, of course, depending on the salary of the player. I think most players would say, why am I paying that salary? Like, what is this going to? Like, what have you guys done? And that's what a lot of the community is saying. It's like, what have you guys done? What has actually been accomplished? And I'll go back to what I was saying earlier, in that a lot of people have no idea what you're doing if you don't really talk about it. Yeah. And so I think that's a huge part of it, is we haven't really talked about it. And that's part of the rebuilding that I imagine, is we're going to be a lot more vocal about the change that we want to see and the good that we're doing. And I think that will also help show players that, like, hey, like the PA is really trying to help us. They care about us as players. And that's the whole goal of the PA, right? We're not trying to build profit. We're trying to become self-sustaining so that we can provide these services for players.
So presumably it sounds like you would potentially take next year, which you said the Players Association has enough funding to get through, and then sort of build out a proof of concept of like, look, we are able to do this. And potentially then if you start to need the money, you could then go to the players and say, look, we've proven our worth over this past year and we've demonstrated our value. I assume that's sort of your plan, is like use next year as the case to make for players to fund it again, starting in 2022.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one of the avenues. And I think Riot didn't completely cut off our funding. What actually happened was we're still in negotiations with reaching a new agreement, and there could be more funding coming. But it's kind of making our case first, being very clear about what type of organization we need, and then making our case for the funding that we would need. But even in that case, as a company, we don't really want to continue receiving funds from Riot, right? Like we want to be self-sustaining, whether it's through dues, whether it's through sponsorships, whether it's through other means. There's a lot of different ways that you can show value. I think, like you were saying, the next year really is a proof of concept to show that look at all the things the PA can do.
Yeah. Okay, so next up, you guys have elections that are actually happening next week. So there's a ton of stuff to dive into here, but first off, I guess the question I'll ask you is: do you anticipate being reelected for another term as president, or in that role or in a different role? I mean, is it your assumption that next week you will remain in this role?
I believe so. I think if there's a player more passionate than me or sees more change, then I would love for them to run too and challenge that, because at the end of the day, right, if there's someone who has a better vision, sees the good that they can do for the players, I would want to work with them. I wouldn't want to be holding them back or saying like, hey, like I'm leading you. It's like, no. And even if I am president, right, it's a collaboration. We're working together. And I think that's a big thing for, like, I don't care too much about the role. For me, it's more about, hey, let's come together and let's try and make something better. And going back to the themes of NA, that's kind of what I see too, is like a lot of individualistic focus, a lot of focus on, I want to get the improvement, me. And the PA is kind of that message. And even my role is a message of, hey, like I'm not really better than anyone else depending on my role. I just want to create good and let's try and do something together. So anyone who is running that wants to do that, I'm happy for them to run too.
There was a lot of conversation, especially when Doublelift ended up rejoining TSM, and you had Bjergsen end up getting equity within the TSM organization. Biofrost also rejoining TSM. Suddenly you had 3 members of the executive committee all within a single team. Was that something that you were concerned about, and is it something that you are hoping to address in the near future, either by, I don't know, ensuring that, I guess one way of doing it would be to ensure that you could only have so many executive committee members from a single team?
Yeah, I think that is, I don't think any issues came up, but I think that it is something to be very clear and aware of, because when you have a majority like that on one team, then it can run into issues. And going into the future iterations, I don't think that's going to be a problem. But if it's something that comes up, I think it really depends on, like you said, a case by case basis, and really being aware of, is there a conflict of interest being created and what specific issues? For example, if it was a TSM related issue, I think that's where we need to be very sensitive about how we're going about the issue and what kind of discussions are taking place. So I think it's better to not have it at all. But I think what I want more so than anything is just player interest, because again, it's like, I'm not trying to do things that only benefit one type of player. I'm trying to do the most good. So I think that we can circumvent those things if the players are really passionate themselves.
I mean, theoretically, you guys could vote next week to like enact a rule change that makes it so that you can only have so many players on the committee from a certain team. Is that something you would consider, or why not?
I think it's something worth considering based on looking at the election now and the results. I don't think that's going to be an issue going forward for the next few years. So it's kind of something to think about and be mindful of, but I don't necessarily think we need to put a rule in right now.
Okay. So you guys are going to have this new board, or this new group of people for next year. Are you, I guess what I would say is, Darshan, like, I have known that you have been very passionate about this as the president. However, It is like very obvious that a lot of the other players within the Players Association have kind of memed on it at points in time, even people from the executive committee. So do you think that there's a change that's happening right now that we'll see these players start to take it more seriously? And I don't know, is that going to be reflected in the voting for the executive committee? I'm just trying to figure out, like, even though you might be very passionate about it, I think this thing can only function in a world where, like, the people that are running it and the people that are in it are also passionate about it. And so I'm curious how confident you are that we're going to see that.
Yeah. So I know you mentioned, and I know Peter has said a lot of things about the PA before.
I wasn't going to say names.
Well, anyways, I think I think he had it like there's genuine like reasons behind why he felt that way, and in that specific example, people are very like clear about they're very honest and clear about their opinions, and so I appreciated that, and I think that there was reason for it. I think going forward, there's going to be like what the PA wants and what I want is people who are genuinely passionate and care about those things, and so I think that's going to be reflective of the changes going forward, because I don't want and the PA wouldn't want people who don't genuinely want to help players and make things better just on the executive committee. And I think that's part of the change, right? Is looking at everything and saying, how can we make sense of this and make value for players? And then show them why it's important by actually doing the things, by actually creating the value, and then also being public about it, which is the last thing. And so I completely agree with you. Like one of the main goals is to get more player buy-in and to take this seriously. And I think that's something I've been realizing myself, right? Even before the Players Association was created, or even at the beginning, I was passionate about it, but I didn't realize how important it was. And if I wasn't someone who was living that and saying, this is really important and look at how much value it can give you, no matter at what stage of your career you are at, there is value to be given, something that can be done for you. How can I expect the players to care? And so I really want to be that example of there are so many resources and opportunities we can create to make players' livelihoods better and to make the region more competitive and to allow them to thrive more. And I just want to do my best to do that. And through doing that and through taking the small steps, picking up one piece of laundry at a time, I think players will change their minds, right? But it's, again, I haven't really made that many posts about it. I haven't talked about the PA that much. I haven't been very upfront and clear about the changes. So why would anyone say that the PA is doing great? Why would anyone say that things are going to change, things are going to be better, right? They don't see what I see and I'm not sharing it. So how could I expect them to know?
Sure.
And so I think that it's a work in progress and I completely understand the concerns and we're very aware.
It sounds like we should be expecting more transparency next year based off of sort of the change in philosophy they're having. So I think people will be excited to hear that at the very least. I'm just kind of curious. Do you think, candidly, it feels like this has been such a weird year for players. And there's been a whole lot of drama around players switching teams and with the pandemic and all this stuff. Do you get the sense, because I certainly do, that players have really started to, at least in some part, take the stuff more seriously? Like, it feels like people probably care a lot more than they did a couple years ago.
I'd like to believe so. I mean, I'm noticing more than ever that I'm having really meaningful conversation with players about what they would like to see changed, what issues they're running into. And it genuinely feels good to like help these players whenever they're having contractual issues or whenever they're running into something, whether it's me directly or the PA itself. And so I think as the scene gets older, as the players get older, and as the way we educate players on understanding contracts, understanding mental health, understanding physical health, understanding peak performance. Once these things gain better understanding, then the players will be able to utilize these tools more. So I believe that, yes, we're on the path to players utilizing the PA better, and we're on the path to players being able to thrive and be more successful.
Very good. Well, is there anything, Darshan, that maybe we didn't talk about that you want people to know as we start to wrap up this interview? Because I think it's getting very dark for both of us as the sun has set.
Yeah. No, I think I elaborated on everything. I wanted to say thank you to Travis for this interview. It's great to have this opportunity to talk about this, and to all the fans and to all the people of NA and also the players. I hope you watch this, and I hope that we can start making meaningful change and focusing the conversation on picking up one piece of laundry, picking up one piece of trash for the dirty room and making it cleaner, because I'm going to do my part. As a PA, we're going to do our part. Travis is trying to do his part. And so I just want you guys to do your part. And I think that if we all think more like this and allow ourselves to try and be more of a positive force for change and think, what if it could be done? Then I think we're going to be on the right path. So
what day is elections?
What day is elections?
Yeah. Your
next
election,
week.
Like the Players Association election. You said it's next week. Is there a day?
Most likely going to be on Monday,
okay.
But that's a separate conversation.
Okay. Okay, well, I'm excited. I'm excited to find out what that means. It sounds like it's a moving date. Well, either way, thank you so much, Darshan, for the interview. I really do appreciate it, and I'm excited for the increased transparency as we go into next year, as around the Players Association. So thanks so much for the interview, and for everyone else, you can check out the rest of my coverage of all things esports right here on my YouTube channel. Hey, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, feel free to check out my sponsor, Alienware. There's a link in the description below. You can use code Travis10OFF-Q3, or maybe, if that doesn't work, try Travis10OFF-Q4. We're switching it up to save 10% off your order. Maybe get an amazing computer like this one, which has an NVIDIA 3080 in it. And while you're at it, subscribe to the channel. We love you. Bye.